All right, so let's take a look at the Eastern Conference matchup, which is between Atlanta United versus Toronto FC. And, you know, every single season, we always tends to get into the conference final, and we always get a team that you just wonder, how in the world did they actually get to the conference final? And this year, that team is Toronto FC because after all the drama that has happened in the regular season and that there's been many people criticizing of the way that, are they even good enough of making the playoffs? And even when they secure the playoffs, are they even good enough to actually go deep into the playoffs? And to be fair, I was one of those critics that I've been kind of downplaying TFC for a very long time. I mean, I start the season talk about how this was going to be a rebuilding year for them and that they're not going to make the playoffs, and that even during the time when they make the playoffs, I was thinking that they were going to have an early exit because they just don't have those difference maker, and that it seemed like throughout when you see some of their games and how in critical moment when they need to step up to get a crucial 3 points or get a crucial points in those situations, they weren't able to take advantage of it. But here they are in the conference final, and really in the last two game, you could say that my doubt of them, whether if they can go deep into the playoffs, whether they of course can be critical in terms of certain situation that will get them over the line, well, there those doubts are pretty much been answered, and the answer to those doubts is that yes, they can get over the hump and able to get it done in those crucial moments. Albeit, I will say this with TFC in terms of the last game against NYCFC, I don't want to say they got lucky in that game because, anytime when you have a team that gets to the conference final, it's no accident. There is no sheer luck in terms of it. But some way they kind of got a little bit gifted in terms of the way that NYCFC make those two mistakes and that they of course capitalize it. And anytime when you are able to capitalize on a team mistake, I'm not going to say they're lucky just because, they're able to capitalize on the opponent mistake. I mean, they didn't make the mistake. It was their opponent's fault to do that. But at the same time, you wonder coming into this game against Atlanta, this is a team that just doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And that makes me a little bit concerned about this TFC team of the fact that, of all the team that is in the conference final right now, you could say that they are the weakest one right now and the most likely one that is not able to move on into the next round. And that I can even maybe go as far as say is that if TFC is able to win this against Atlanta, this might be not only the biggest upset in terms of the two conference final matchup, but this could be one of the biggest upset we have ever seen, considering the fact that nobody thought that this is a team that can go very deep into the playoffs. I mean, this is not the same Toronto FC team a couple of years ago when they were by far the best team in the league, and they were a team that of course become the first MLS franchise to win the treble, and that this was before when Atlanta and LAFC kind of took over that discussion of whether or not they are the greatest team of all time. And heck, this team even got all the way to the CCL final and almost become the first ever MLS team to win the CONCACAF Champions League, only to lose it on penalty, and that was probably the closest we have seen an MLS team got to CCL. I mean, this is not that kind of team a couple of years ago, and yet they are one step away to be kind of where those teams were, which is in MLS Cup and potentially winning the trophy. Now, that being said, looking at this match and in terms of 5 things to watch out for, obviously the first thing to watch out for is that there's going to be some injury concern for both of these teams. Atlanta has been confirmed that they will not have Miles Robinson once again for this match. Michael Parkhurst is also questionable in this game. I haven't got any report of whether or not if he is going to be playing in this game. So once again, they're going to have to do with their makeshift backline with guys like Florentine Parkba, LGP, And also, Mikey Ambrose most likely is going to be in that spot where Miles Robinson occupied. While Toronto, they might not have Josie Altidore again, and that it's been kind of a miracle. The fact that, throughout this season, whenever we see Toronto does not have Josie Altidore, or when they don't have Pozuelo, or just don't have both of these guys on the same pitch, this team just does not operate going forward. And yet, somehow in the playoffs, not only the fact that they aren't able to have both of those guys on the same pitch, but yet they are still doing enough going forward on the attack, and that they are still moving through into the next round. I mean, it kind of really defies the logic of what have they done in the regular season. Now, if they do not have Josie Altidore again for this game, I think maybe eventually it's going to catch up to them where they might lack that firepower. And, since I'm talking about firepower, I'm going to just switch quickly into the four things that I'm going to be watching out for. Is that, do TFC have enough going forward to break down this tough Atlanta defense? I mean, a lot of people have been talking about, in terms of Atlanta United, about what has gone wrong in terms of this team going forward in the attack, and why isn't it as lethal as the attack that they were under Tata Martino. But I don't think a lot of people have gave credit to this defense that Atlanta United has put. And I know a lot of Atlanta United fans don't like the way that Frank de Boer set up this team, and that it makes this team look like a very boring kind of style of team, just kind of be way too defensive and not really kind of like a free-flowing kind of attacking team that Atlanta United used to be when under Tata Martino. But at the end of the day, if this kind of defensive set where they're able to score just one or two goals and able to grind out resort and have a great defense to win you games, then at the end of the day, it's just as effective as a team that can win like 6 or 7-0. Now, it might not be the most entertaining thing, but I think at the end of the day, we can all agree that I think people would want to see their team win rather than playing some entertaining brand of soccer and they don't get the result at the end of the day. So, it's going to be interesting to see if this TFC team can break down this tough Atlanta defense that, as I mentioned, they do have suffer some injury in terms of that back line, and that back line is just incredibly thin right now with the way that they have suffered injuries there. But still, even with the makeshift back line they had in the last game against Philly, they did a good job in terms of shutting down that Phillies attack, and that, I think Atlanta defense, you could argue that it probably is the best defense in the league, and that it's a defense that I don't think a lot of people have given enough credit with the way that this team has defending throughout the season. And, going back to what I said about TFC, if they have enough firepower, if Pozuelo is going to be the only guy that's going to bring some attacking force on this team, that makes me a little bit concerned, because after that, who else do you have? I mean, Jonathan Osorio, who occasionally he does show up in big moments, but he's not really a natural goal scorer. And then the other goal scorer you would have is Josie Altidore, who, as I said, he is questionable in this game, and if he's not available in this game, it's going to go all in the hands of Pozuelo. And that, despite the fact that it's been defied logic with the way that even without Altidore, they can still win the game, I don't know if it's going to work again for the third game in a row, and that especially they're facing a defense that is just much more stingier than the first two defense that they have faced so far in the postseason. But going back to the second thing that I want to say about this matchup and to watch out for is that Atlanta have actually only won once in this matchup. So believe it or not, Atlanta, as much as you would think that they're going to be heavy favorites into this game, they're going to be facing against a team that has been kind of their bogey team for a bit. And especially in the first three games where it was all a draw between both of these teams. And that TFC in the last meeting was able to beat Atlanta in this matchup by a final score of 3-2. So, TFC definitely have Atlanta's number in the last couple of games, and that's even when TFC was not doing very well last season, when they were arguably one of the most disappointing team in this season, and yet they still able to not lose against Atlanta last season. So that's kind of very interesting, and we'll see if Atlanta can, of course, overcome that. They, of course, won once in this matchup, and their lone win did come earlier this season at home against TFC when they finally were able to beat Toronto for the first time in this matchup by beating them 2-0 at home. The third thing to watch out is that can Atlanta hit second and third gear after getting the first goal? So, from what I'm seeing with Atlanta in this playoffs is that, yeah, it seemed like they always tends to have those moments where they show that attacking quality that it was under Tata Martino, and that they can show that free-flowing kind of attacking force. But there are times where this team just cannot attack whatsoever, and that they just look very sloppy going forward. And that, in the first game against New England, for majority of the game, they were kind of sloppy going forward until they finally got that big moment from Franco Escobar to, of course, win the game. And then the last game was a good example of what I wrote here. They got the first goal early in the game, and you're thinking, okay, they're going to probably score second, or they're going to probably score 2 or 3 goals after that. But instead, they just kind of backed off, and that they kind of never got into second and third gear. And that I really think when you are a team that is going to let an opponent to hang into the game, and even if you're the favorites coming into this game, anytime when you decide to let your opponent still in the game for as long as possible, it is a very, very dangerous thing to do. Because, in the last game, Atlanta, they let Philly in the game for as long as possible, and that, if the Union, if there was a couple of bounces that go in their way, and that if they would have shown that clinical finish that they were missing in that game could have been a whole different matchup. So, for Atlanta, they cannot, if they score the first goal in this game, they cannot afford to just sit back and just kind of be compact and hope that you can, of course, walk out with a 1-0 victory, because, we've seen in the playoffs, it doesn't take much, even for teams that a lot of people question whether or not they have enough firepower going forward, that is Toronto FC. It doesn't take much if they get a one lucky bounce or one good pass from them, and that they, of course, show that clinical finishing. All of a sudden, it is that 1-1, and that is when Atlanta could really get into trouble. So they got to make sure that if they do get the first goal in the game, they got to continue that attacking power and get that second and third goal, so that you are making sure that you, of course, will win this game without any concern whatsoever. I already talked about the 4-point a couple of minutes ago. And then the last point to watch out for this matchup is that Atlanta could host MLS Cup again if LAFC was to lose Seattle's Sounders in that Western Conference final. TFC, of course, unfortunately, they have no chance in terms of hosting an MLS Cup because they are the lowest seed in terms of the 4 teams that is in the conference final. But yeah, Atlanta, they are second in line in terms of hosting MLS Cup, and then I'm pretty sure they're going to be rooting for Seattle in that game against LAFC on Tuesday, and hope that, of course, when they win this game against CFC, they can once again host an MLS Cup final, and that would definitely be an interesting final between Atlanta versus Seattle, and that it kind of is something similar to last year where Atlanta is facing another Cascadia team, and that the record in terms of Cascadia team in MLS Cup, which is now 5 straight appearance with a Cascadia team in MLS Cup, is going to happen if Seattle is able to win that game against LAFC when they face either Atlanta or TFC in this game. Keys to victory for both teams. For Atlanta, the attack have to show up not just for 5 minutes, but for the full 90. And this goes back to what I said about the third point, where if their attack gets going and they're able to score a goal, they can't just back off and say that we're just going to defend until the game is over. They got to make sure they got to push on for a second or third goal, and that they need to make sure that their attack is functional to go the full 90 minute. I mean, when you look at the attacking arsenal of Atlanta, they definitely have some good attacking pieces going forward in their pedigree. But the problem is there's just been time where, they just cannot quite able to get it going, and just cannot quite string it together, despite the fact that there is that potential to do that. And I really think the keys to them is that they need to show that potential, and that they're able to score a couple of goals to basically easily win this conference final. And as for TFC, they got to capitalize on any Atlanta United mistake and take their chances. Obviously, TFC is not going to have a lot of chance, and I'm guessing they're going to do something similar to what I said about Seattle versus LAFC, where the Sounders are just going to kind of park the bus a little bit, and that, Atlanta, they don't make a lot of mistakes, but there are times where they do make those mistakes, and that I think for TFC, they need to do exactly the same thing they did in the last game, which is able to capitalize the mistake that their opponent make and make sure they be clinical in front of goal. Because if they're not clinical in front of goal, they basically fall into the victim of what Philly and New England found out when they face against Atlanta, where they're able to get chances, but when they don't put it away, that's why they got eliminated from the playoffs. And in terms of head-to-head matchup, I kind of mentioned this throughout the video. In the last game, it was TFC victorious over Atlanta 3-2, but Atlanta did get their first victory against TFC earlier this season with a 2-0 win at home. Then it was a 4-1 smackdown of Atlanta, and I believe this was the game on decision day that prevented Atlanta United of getting the all-time points total in the regular season. And in the first free meeting, it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams, and that, again, Atlanta seems to, for whatever reason, struggle against TFC, and that it's kind of been one of those bogey teams that they have. But last year, when they faced against the Red Bulls in the conference final, and how I kind of said that it was going to be one of the bogey team for them, and that is the reason why they probably is not going to win it. I'm not going to make the same mistake again this year and say that just because this is a bogey team for Atlanta doesn't mean the fact that they can't win this game. And that I think maybe this year they're going to be much more the favorites coming into this game than against the Red Bulls last year, because last year the Red Bulls won the Supporters Shield, and that Red Bulls team looked like was finally going to be the team that goes to MLS Cup, whereas this year they're going to be definitely the favorites against the TFC side that nobody expected they be at this stage, and nobody expected them to go this far into the playoffs. But either way, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think is going to happen in this game, and make sure you leave your prediction below. And actually, that's something I didn't say back in the Western Conference final, so I'll just kind of say it now. Make sure you also leave a comment in terms of that other match preview that I done with the Western Conference final. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.